Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, it was a winding road to get there, but eventually a luxurious result for the Red Raiders as the soul of John Denver remains at home in West Texas.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So visit FanDuel.com to get started with the Only Chris level. I'm Casey Cowan dropping in for a quick weekend edition as we have very little time to transition between ball games for the Red Raiders. You take care of business in an impressive way against West Virginia, and you got a couple of sleeps to get in before all of a sudden Houston is knocking at your door. So we'll look back on the win over the Mountaineers for Texas Tech, and of course, on tomorrow's episode, get ready for Red Raiders and Cougars round 2 with plenty of revenge, I'm sure, on the minds of Houston. But, Chris, what a ball game from United Supermarkets Arena as West Virginia comes to town. And you see it on the screen there, another feature cast, and it's similar names, but it's kind of a different combination. And we've seen some of that throughout the year as far as some of the roles shifting, evolving as far as what each game calls for. Unfortunately, this one calling for some slack to be picked up by virtue of the absence of Chance McMillan. So you start the day with that kind of news, and you start the ball game thinking, whoa, we may have big problems here because offensively it was tough sledding. And then all of a sudden, different gear found, different kind of, I guess, switch flipped or whatever might have happened. The Red Raiders wind up running away with this one.
Yeah, you know, Chance, there was an issue at the end of the TCU game, and I don't know what anybody on TV saw, but, you know, those of us who were there, it was just kind of kept messing with his shoelace and kind of kept limping back to a huddle. This was like the last 2-3 minutes of the game. Don't really know if it's foot, ankle, whatever, but there was just a limp, a slight limp, and you know, obviously it was people saw him at practice on what would have been on Thursday, I guess, which was in the media was out there, and he had a boot on. And sometimes, you know, it's precautionary. You're just trying to stabilize it so it doesn't, you don't hurt it any further. But then you show up on a Saturday there, and he's not going to play, and there's no EY that's going to play either. There's no Jazz Henderson that's going to play either. So you are looking at it going, well, I guess we're going with 7. And that's what you did. So yeah, because at one point you were shooting like 18% from the field in this game. It was like 4 of 18, 4 of 19, 4 of 20, somewhere around in there. And again, West Virginia does this is what they do. This is really their only chance is to play grinded out defense. They have one of the best. He's just a nuisance. Sincere Harris is one of the best on-the-ball defenders in the league, and he just pesters you, and they overplay everything. They're very physical, and that's kind of Darren DeVries's style. But they're missing his Coach DeVries's kid, who would have been a scorer and all these things for them. But this is kind of what they do, and you're thinking, okay, yeah, here we go, and we have minus one of our scorers or playmakers that can help break this thing down. And JT Toppin did next to nothing there for a period of time. Darion Williams really wasn't involved. It was more Kevin Overton. It was more Elijah Hawkins, and then Toppin and Williams started to come along, and certainly Christian Anderson did. But yeah, you were kind of going at this thing a bit shorthanded, if you will, and to West Virginia's credit, I think they're pretty good with what they have to work with. I think they're pretty good. I mean, you don't beat the teams that they've beaten this year and not have something to you. And so you thought, yeah, we're in one right now. But for 25 minutes, you played extremely well. But the first 15, it was West Virginia's game. Luckily, it's a 40-minute game, and you own the last 25. But they're up 9 on you in your building. And you don't have a lot of answers there with about 5.5 to go in the first half, and before you kind of started to turn it a bit.
Well, and I was thinking, you know, you're too good of an offensive team, even without Chance McMillan, for that to continue all day. but good grief, spotting a team like that, something like that, in your building, taking some energy out, sucking life out of what was eventually an electric crowd. But I'm thinking, okay, here we go. So I don't want to get too into the weeds as far as expert analysis and questioning here with you, Chris, but I've got to go that way a little bit. So my question would be, what the hell happened? Because not only did Texas Tech turn things around and then really actually make it look good by the end of the day, not just get a win, but make it look good. But West Virginia was sort of taken out of what they want to do, I feel like, as well, because I was expecting, just like you're talking about there, getting into the start that you got into, still for Texas Tech, obviously, to have a chance to win in the second half, but for this to very much turn into that like traffic jam kind of basketball game that you've been in with them, so many times before. So what did you see, play out that was changing for the better for Tech?
Well, I'm a building truster. I just think at some point, if you give the USA something to cheer for, that is worth something. And I think that your defense caused a few misses. You rebounded it well, and then here the building kind of came alive. And I don't think West Virginia really ultimately ever recovered from that. And then it just kind of kept building and building and building and whatnot. And I think all of those things kind of factored in. I think it was your defense that kind of started to come along. And whether it's because what you did on Javon Small hasn't been done much at all this year. And he still got into double digits, but I think he was 3 of 14, extremely inefficient. He had to really work and grind for what he got. And you made him uncomfortable, which made me a bit nervous because Chance McMillan has been kind of your, on any kind of guard that really can score. He's been the one that, okay, Chance, you got him. That's who I think would have gotten the assignment had he played. And so you're without him, and yet you still get this done because I think as Grant talked about, we'll sit here and talk about the 5 threes and Christian Anderson almost being the leading scorer in the entire game. But Grant would tell you that it was his defense that needs to be discussed. And then when you think about the fact that he fouled out on Tuesday night in Fort Worth, fouls out, and then he comes back, on a Saturday against a big-time offensive player and a few other guys that he's matched up on, and he plays 38 minutes and change and is the only player in a Texas Tech uniform that commits no fouls, 0. So that should be highlighted as much as anything. What he did on the defensive end. Yeah, the shots are awesome. We talk about this, C4, light them up, right? But he's coming along for the defensive ride as well. And I think even after the game, he was like, I've never been a defender anywhere I've ever been. And
talked about it.
Yeah, they've taught me, and it's like taught me, demanded from me, coached me, and to his credit, he's been willing to listen to the demands and to want to be coached and to buy in to because some kids are he would be good enough theoretically if he wanted to be to fight it a bit, and then maybe he wouldn't play as much if he did fight it, but he's just like, man, I'm a mold me how you see, and that's why you're seeing a kid just blossom in front of your eyes right now. But so all of that kind of factors in the building. I think you forced a few misses. We had touched on this though. The rebounding scenario was just that was going to kind of largely tell you the story. You're a +10 on the glass, but anytime West Virginia was beating people, that they were, for the most part, easily winning the rebounding battle. It's not the best shooting team. It's not the team with a bunch of scorers, but they're just going to kind of do what Oklahoma State does or do what UCF does and just get it up on the glass, go get it, and then kind of grind away at it and whatnot. But you were able to rebound pretty well, and so I just think the combination of it. But you turned it around, and then you started playing beautiful music there down the street. It was like a 15-3 run in the half. It was like a 15-3 run, and then if you even shorten it up, it was a 10-0 run to end the half because they go from up 9 to down 3 at some point, and that's where the run came in, and then you just totally took control back of the game and felt pretty good going in the locker room. Although Grant would be the first one to say, fellas, what are we doing with that start? Like, you cannot do that, and you better not do that on Monday night versus Houston. But you live to tell about it here.
I think there are actually a lot of things on display about this team as a result of this game, or a lot of things to learn about this team intangibly speaking. First, today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports and the best way to spice up any game, anytime. You think you got what it takes to win up to 100 times your money? All you got to do is select 2 to 6 players, pick more or less on their projected stats, place your entry, and boom, you're ready to roll. PrizePicks is not only the best way to get action on sports in most states, including Texas, but PrizePicks also puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When the picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. With easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and a giant selection of players, projections, and stat categories, it's no surprise that PrizePicks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So get in on the fun and the winning and download the PrizePicks app today and use our code LOCKEDONCollege, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play only $5. Again, that's our code LOCKEDONCollege on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you just play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. With PrizePicks, run your game. I think there are actually a lot of things on display about this team as a result of this game, or a lot of things to learn about this team intangibly speaking from this game. And yeah, you have the run there in the first that you'd like to say, like, man, must have been a heck of a halftime speech if you're just looking at the disparity in the two halves, but they already made the run before halftime. So it wasn't even really, a big swing there. But then you continue out of the locker room. I think it was 10-4, 10-2, something like that for Tech to start the half in their favor. And you really kind of just dispatch of the Mountaineers' will. Not that wouldn't was the last run, but I mean, just kind of blew me away. And I left, still respecting West Virginia as a team. I didn't think that they were just, a circus out there. I think they had single-digit turnovers. And I think a lot of what went wrong for them is a credit to Texas Tech. And one of those things intangibly I'm talking about that you learn about this team, and I think is so impressive, is what happened defensively, Chris, because when you start off a game like that and just like you're talking about, I think with Christian Anderson individually, you can say for the team as a whole, like, man, you might be good enough offensively to kind of slough off sometimes the intensity from a defensive standpoint. You won't be the best team that you can be, obviously, doing that, but you might still, look okay here or there doing that. But this team has chosen not to do that. And I think the fact that you get off to it's beyond tough. I want to say tough offensive start, but that's like something I've never seen. You're like 3 for your first 17 or something at one point. You get off to that kind of start offensively, and you're like, this sucks. Nothing's coming easy. But then you make the choice somehow as a team to dig in defensively, which is the place to dig in whenever it's going that way offensively. But not every team, and I'd say few teams actually probably have, kind of the character, the intestinal fortitude to go that route. But Grant McCaslin's team does, and that's something that speaks to me, Chris, as a basketball fan, because I think it's just a good sign for the intangibles of this team. Obviously, when things get much tighter, much more difficult, not only as you wrap up the regular season, but you get into March, and like we talked about all year, you're going to have to find some kind of different ways to win basketball games probably when some of those shots aren't necessarily falling. So those are some things that stood out to me, and I think maybe things you don't quite find in the box score.
Well, and the building, back to being a building truster.
Yeah, building truster. I love that phrase, by the way. Put it on a T-shirt.
The building loves the defensive playmaking. I'm not so certain that, when the threes go in and the dunks go in and all that, but like when you get a block shot or you get a miss, that's what really sets it up for any sort of noise on the other end. When you got guys diving on the floor or just, because – yeah, and I think Grant is starting to, and some of these coaches, and we're starting to see it a little bit. Like you look around the league over the weekend, and Arizona got by BYU. Shout out to Tony Padilla. I see you, man. I like the call, man. I appreciate that. Terrible.
Just another day in the Big 12, baby.
That's right. Terrible call, but I didn't hate it just based on the
handshake line altercation. By the way, always here for those.
Yes, Colorado got Baylor. And so what reason I bring these up is I think what Grant is starting to say, and I even heard Kelvin Sampson say this too after they beat Iowa State.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And FanDuel's live betting feature electrifies every moment, whether backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch shot. You're never going to miss your chance to get in on the action. Plus, the app, easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. And make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
I think what Grant is starting to say, and I even heard Kelvin Sampson say this too after they beat Iowa State, the grind physically and mentally is starting to catch up with teams. There's been no break for anybody. You still have – you're like in this lull period where, there's still – you're hearing bracket talk, you're hearing seed talk, you're hearing geography talk about where you're going to get sent – whatever. And yet you still you've got 2 more weeks of this before you even get to that point. And so you're starting to see some weird results, or maybe results that aren't weird, but it's just I think the grind is getting to players and teams, and you just aren't sure when it's going to catch up to you. And it may have gotten to you this past week in Fort Worth. I mean, I'd be willing to say that it probably did. You just kind of ran out of gas and whatnot. Not that you just didn't show up, but it theoretically in kind of a bad loss, if you want to talk about it that way. But you just aren't sure when one night you show up and the shots aren't going to go in. They're just not. It doesn't matter how well you shoot it, how open you are. They're just not going to go in. You're tired mentally, physically. I've got my buddy over there in a boot. He can't help us today. Damn. What do we? Well, but to Grant's team's credit, in this game, they figured out a different path. To your point, and the different path would have 2 been substitutes almost the entire year. It was Christian Anderson and Kevin Overton that really provided you with the steady hand or the spark that you would need in Overton's case. And they played a ton of minutes, but it was defensively. You held this West Virginia team to 32% from the field for the game. Yeah. You're going to win a lot of games when the opposition is shooting in the 30s from a percentage standpoint. Fact. And they made the choice to, not that you're consciously making this choice, but the way, because in basketball, you can kind of somewhat, if your kids are locked in, you can kind of determine who's going to get shots and generally where they're going to get them. And I think you had tried to take a lot away from Javon Small, and maybe you gave a few more looks to Amani Hansberry, and he did knock him down. And I thought, because if Javon Small comes, he starts catching fire and then Hansberry's still doing his thing, they've got a 2-headed monster. Now you may be in trouble. But Small just never got on track. And then you cooled Hansberry off. And then at the end of the day, they just don't have enough offense to outscore you, especially when you kind of started rolling with it. But I did like it. This was a defensive and a different cast of characters here. JT Toppin has a big day. But D5, okay, Chance doesn't play. Elijah Hawkins didn't score a ton. He wasn't a huge factor in this game, but it was Christian Anderson's 21 and Kevin Overton's 10 that I thought kind of helped you. And you've needed to get Kevin going. And I love the aggressiveness. I love that he was attacking the rim, getting downhill. Keep in mind, that guy on the other bench coached him last year. So he's well aware of what Kevin could do. And anyway, so I don't disagree with you at all on found a different way to get to the end. And it was fun because go look at West Virginia's recent scores. They've been in almost every game, man. I mean, they've been a lot of these games, especially some of these wins. And, they've been close, but they haven't gotten beat up like they were. And you just wonder if it kind of caught up to them a bit. The season did or whatever. But, yeah, 22-point win over those guys, that's pretty solid. Because at this point, they're still in the tournament as far as I'm
I think so. Man, I think also just you kind of touched on some of those reserves and some of the guys stepping up. You mentioned Elijah Hawkins. Hawkins plus those guys that you consider typically reserves, guys like Federico, Overton, or Anderson. Those four guys made up more than half of the total of your rebounds. So I thought between those and Federico, you kind of expect that from, but between those other guys who are not necessarily, anything long, doing some work on the glass again just speaks sort of to the character of the team, one that is apparently ultra competitive, and that's a great thing to be. But before we get out of here, I did want to finish with the margin and kind of the way that you finished the game and what that could mean for Monday night. Because I got to tell you, as you're establishing the lead that you were, I'm doing a little looking ahead, Chris. I'm doing a little thinking ahead as it relates to what's coming to town. And I felt like, wow, what a luxury as you actually wind up in a situation where, I don't know, maybe you're saving some energy. At least it wasn't some emotionally exhausting,
I agree,
down to the wire,
double overtime.
Yeah, exactly. I was already thinking about, man, this is a bit of a luxury, I think, here compared to what I expected, certainly in the first few minutes or whatever, given what you got coming to town Monday.
Yeah, because that's the first thing I thought of when we got the news Friday afternoon or whatever it was about the Iowa State team. It's directly where my head went to. It's like Curtis Jones and Keyshawn Gilbert not going to play. One's got a minor injury, the other one's sick. And I'm like, well, Houston's not going to have any grinded out emotional. They got a bit of a freebie here. They got to play Texas Tech. Didn't work out for them, minus JT Toppin, Kevin Overton, and Grant McCaslin. And then, and then they get Iowa State, which is one of the top teams in this league. It just is. And there was like a combined 32 points a game not playing for Iowa State. Okay, so as we localize that back to your point, no Chance McMillan, Darion Williams plays only 22 minutes, and you beat these guys by 22. Again, I think we – far too often along the ride, I have been guilty of trying to find this is what maybe is wrong. This is what I wish was more right. And yet you just have to look at your team sometimes and go, this is legit what you're doing here, because you've now won Big 12 conference games without Toppin, without Darion Williams, without Chance McMillan, without Kevin Overton, without your head coach. And yet you've just
crazy to think about that list.
It really is. Yeah, I mean it just is. Federico had the stint where he was out a portion of the season. We knew about Elijah Hawkins and Christian Anderson at the beginning of the season. JT Toppin missed a month, and so and then you're like, man, do you have enough? But I thought you would be good enough to beat these guys without Chance McMillan. You beat TCU without D5 a couple of weeks ago. And again, if you're a building truster, then I think that has to factor in. I don't know if you're getting this done on the road without a key piece, but at home and the building helps you a little bit, and the energy and whatnot, it just seemed like it got you over the hump, and then you kind of started rolling. But you're right, man. You got to whether keep him on ice, whether it was Chance McMillan, and we'll get into that as it relates to the Houston game in an upcoming episode. But and then only played D5 for 22 minutes because he took a spill, and every time one of these, I'm like, oh no, here we go, and he kind of went on that break, and then he just melted into the floor, and we saw the replay, and he just he stepped on I think it was Sincere Harris's foot. D5's foot slides over it, and it but it wasn't an ankle twist. It wasn't, but it's you got big man, move real fast, go down. And he's had these ankle issues leading up to this, but you got to back off of him and leave him over there next to you as you wound this thing down. And that's why Grant, it's funny because he's standing right in front of me doing this. He throws up the stop sign to these guys. Like as you're trying to milk the last 8 minutes, you get a rebound, and then they're just Chance or not Chance, but Elijah or Christian. Here they come. And he's like, hold on, stop. And sometimes it's like kids with selective hearing with their parents. I didn't hear what you were saying, Mom or Dad. Sometimes they throw that alley-oop, or sometimes they go ahead and pull that three. And he's like, no, because
I was thinking immediately the alley-oop, man. The Baylor hoop.
Yes. Yeah, when Andrew Sorrells and Avery Benson they had to write letters and apologize to Scott Drew, and it was a big mess. That was Chris Beard that made those guys do that. But
now the Lubbock Christian University director of athletics.
yes, that's right. But the stop sign's getting thrown up because you're trying to just get to the end here. And so you don't have to put your guys back in. You don't allow the other team to make a run, and you're trying to manage the situation, all because you had played so well early on in the second half and just kind of ultimately had pulled away from these guys. So you just get the rest or the breaks when you can get them, because a 22-point win in this league they're hard to come by. It doesn't matter you're home or away, whatever. And you've been fortunate, I guess, 2 of them in the last week in Stillwater and in home versus West Virginia to have some lopsided games, but you try to sneak some rest in for your guys and keep less mileage off their tires as much as you can.
Was kind of a twisting and turning path to this win, sort of an M. Night Shyamalan day for Texas Tech as a team, but like the twist in that you blow their doors off at the end of the day. A game in which, again, 3 for 17, 4 for 18, whatever it was, to start the ball game, you overcome that. I think actually turned in one of your best efforts of the year as far as just the way the game played out. So good stuff from Tech, and now we get ready for another big one, and it's a week that should be plenty exciting as we're talking Mountaineers, Cougars, Jayhawks, oh my. And you like the way it sets up a little bit as well as far as the timing, because you do have this quick turnaround, which, as we were just talking about, you, I think, gave yourself some benefit by doing what you did against West Virginia. But then after Monday, Chris, you got a little spell before you head to Lawrence, Kansas, just a little one, but a few days stack up. So, man, really like the way the week could shape up if Tech can take advantage of some of these opportunities. But we'll circle back to Chance McMillan, and, of course, we'll set the table for Red Raiders and Cougars on the next episode. So looking forward to that. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man, and we'll see you for that one.
Guns up. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend, people, and we'll talk some Cougs coming up on the next one. And, big night at the arena coming up on a Monday night.
Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thanks to the Everydayers for always being out there, and shout out to the Matador Mob for being there as well. Hit the show notes, find a link to a free 14-day trial. That's your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text and straight to your phone. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks as always for the time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.